Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ducks Confidential Podcast. I'm James Crepea, joined as always by Ryan Clark, and we'll be going over the 16-13 win for Oregon at Wisconsin in a game that certainly played out far closer and more competitively than I think many were expecting, perhaps even Oregon itself. But that said, with the 8th game in 8 weeks, all in conference play, something that no other team in the country had to do, and playing at a place that, particularly at night, not the easiest of venues to play in. Coming away with a win is about the only thing that really mattered, to be totally honest. If you're arguing about style points and those sorts of things, particularly in a 12-team playoff world, I think you're losing the forest between the trees. This is no longer the issue, particularly when the top 4 conference champions are assured first round buys, and you're one of the few undefeateds left standing. I mean, what are you worried about? When you're in control of your own fate, are you concerned that they're going to drop to the 2 seed? I mean, in terms of what ramifications this would have if they continue to play like that, if they don't, the offense doesn't do well enough early enough, and is that inconsistent against whoever you might play in the Big Ten championship game once that becomes official? That's the concern, and that's, to me, we're conflating too many different things here. First things first was get in and get out with a win. Could it have looked better? Sure. Should it? Hey, credit to both defensive coordinators in this game who flat out had really good plans, and grand scheme of things, the defensive coaches out-coached and out-schemed and outmaneuvered the offensive coaches, one of whom is no longer employed as the offensive coordinator for Phil Longo at Wisconsin. And he had problems going into the game, and certainly had problems on Saturday against Oregon's defense. But I don't think there's a need to necessarily extrapolate a lot. I'm not saying there's not anything, but I don't think there's a need to really try to draw unbelievable correlations or, like I say, extrapolations from a close game just because it may have not felt terribly comfortable as a fan to watch and experience it. You're going to have some of those things, and plenty of teams who've won national championships, if that is a club that this team and this program is eventually going to join this season, plenty of teams who've won titles the last 5, 6, 7 years have had to go through similar experiences, particularly on the road.
Yeah, and this Wisconsin team is absolutely like a tough team, and even though they're middling in the Big Ten, like they put up a really strong performance, and you even mentioned it with the defensive job that they did. We knew that they had one of the best pass defenses in the country, and despite a strong day for Jordan James, I think they had a better game defending the run than maybe folks might have expected, given where the statistics were. And the crowd was great at the game, obviously sold out. We were out there, myself, you, and Bill Oram out there in Wisconsin, and the press box was shaking during a lot of that game. And so that was a really difficult atmosphere to go into. And frankly, with how many games in a row this Oregon team has played, with how many little nicks and bang ups they have here and there, adding another one with Justice Lowe sort of banged up a little bit in this game. He obviously came back. There's a lot to deal with when you've played that many games in a row, that many weeks in a row. Now, Dan Lanning and the coaching staff and the players, of course, will make that less than it is publicly, but privately, I'm sure they're feeling it. and they're relieved to get into this bye week before a stretch run that they want to not only beat Washington, but go win a Big Ten title, get themselves that bye that you're talking about, and make a deep run in the college football playoff. And so, yeah, Dillon Gabriel had a rough game. That by no means is an indicator of some fall off to come for him. He's had an incredible season. He went up against a great pass defense. And additionally, even if he had a rough game overall statistically, made arguably the throw of the season between like three guys to Terrence Ferguson on that fourth down, coming after the Ducks participated in jump around, the entire sequence of which is assuredly going to be featured on Ducks versus them this week. But look, he made that throw. He made the plays when he needed to. Jordan James did a great job on the ground to sort of run violently and finish the game off the way it did. And more than anything, the Oregon defense had one of its best performances of the season, and for the better part of that game, completely shut down Wisconsin. Mateo Uiagalelei has become a star in college football. The guy's not even 20 years old yet, and he's emerged as a real star on this Oregon defense. Even without Jordan Birch, it really was no issue for Oregon, and their defense put in a tremendous performance.
Gabriel's stat line reads okay, not terribly, not great by his standards, certainly, and I think some of it is grading on his own standard. 22 of 31 for 218, had the interception in the red zone, which, of course, folks will harp on, as they should. It was not a great throw. That said, it wasn't right at a defender either. It was off a deflection, but it was off a deflection because it was behind the receiver. So it wasn't a great throw. There were a couple of other decisions that he made, both in the passing game and even one in the run game, that were curious, I'll say. There were a couple of passes that were forced. There were a couple, frankly, that credit the defense. They took away the first read, and then he had to throw short of the yard to gain, particularly on third down. I think in one or two instances where it just was where it was. There was also, you talk about the fourth down conversion pass to Ferguson, which is obviously enormous. I would love another camera angle at it to see for sure, but I'm pretty sure Evan Stewart was open, and I mean wide open, even further down the field on the same side on that play. So, yes, he makes a absolutely just on a rope throw and threading a needle that really wasn't there for the taking. I wish that college football had some of the next-gen stats that you have in the NFL to know exactly how low a probability that throw was, because it could not have been terribly high. And yes, that's a huge play because it ends up leading to the result that it does. But in terms of what else was there for the taking and what could have been had, I think, based on what I could see on the telecast and just rewatching the TV footage, looked like Stewart might have been open, and I mean wide open, for a big gain after on that play. For one of the last plays, one of the last possessions, where Gabriel breaks off a run and converts. I wish I would have been able to catch it better in real time. We were down on the field at that point, so certain angles were harder to come by, but he turned back into the middle of the field and ends up getting stopped. And I think if he had just run to the right corner towards the pylon, I'm not sure there's a defender in proximity who can stop him other than the one who I think was covering Jordan James, who had his back to the play.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of instances where, whether it was, like I say, some questionable decisions in the passing game, or like I say, I'm pointing out the one on the run where that's a run where he converts. But on a run where, best he could tell from television footage, it looked like he had nothing but green grass if he kept going on the angle that he was on and then cut back into the defense. But that's it. I don't think he had a bad game. I just didn't think he had necessarily definitely not great, and graded on the curve of 60-year starting quarterback and Heisman contender Dillon Gabriel, maybe not even good. by that standard.
Yeah, certainly not by his standard. And I think that he was just a little off. Like, I think he is the Ducks didn't want to be in this situation, and they were largely in this situation because of some of these mistakes. But he is allowed to be human at the end of the day, and he is. I understand the frustration on the part of some Duck fans that, look, this guy is a 6-year starter. He should be fine going on the road, and I don't think the atmosphere going on the road was by any means what led to this. But he was just a little off. He just had a bit of an off game. A little out of sync with his receivers, forcing it a little bit when his first read wasn't there. I think that's less of a problem on Dylan's part as much as it is just a really, strong performance from this secondary in Wisconsin, and a good game plan to limit Gabriel, because you watch this Oregon team all year, number 1 team in the country, 11-0. The engine of their offense is Dylan Gabriel and his ability to make the right reads and make plays to these elite receivers. And so the Badgers knew that, and they keyed on it. And yeah, Jordan James gashed him a few times, but I think they would be very happy with the defensive game plan and how it worked out. Now, could Oregon have taken advantage of some advantageous situations and not kicked as many field goals as they did, or set up for as many field goals as they did? Yeah, absolutely. And those are things that they're going to review on tape and want to be better at. But for Dylan's sake, it was an off game, yes, but it was not a harbinger of doom, as people on the internet like to think bad or middling games from starting quarterbacks are. It was just a tough one, and he's going to even potentially have another tough one in the playoff, or maybe against Washington or in the Big Ten championship. But this Oregon team is built in such a way that it can withstand its elite quarterback, emotional leader, and Heisman candidate having a not perfect game, because he's had so many great games this year. The expectation for him is so high.
I think that some of the decisions that he made that are being criticized, I think, are the unfair ones, and I think some ones that deserve criticism aren't necessarily getting talked about. I mean, for instance, the one where he very nearly has a second interception, I'm not sure that really was on Dylan at all. I mean, they even mentioned in the telecast, looks like Evan Stewart basically stops on the play and sits on his route, and Dylan is not expecting him to do that. So they're not in alignment and on the same page on what's supposed to happen there. Now, was it an option route? Was it, how much of it was we don't know. All we know is the end result. But the quarterback is thinking the receiver's going to go a certain place. The receiver doesn't. There's a difference of about a yard, but that yard very nearly leads to an interception. Whose fault is that? I don't know. End result, incompletion. But I think that's the kind of play that draws more of a chorus of criticism necessarily about decision-making and those things. Whereas, like I say, there were other instances. Let's put it this way, for all those who harp about forcing it, particularly to Ferguson. Well, again, the 4th and 9, if you want to argue about force, that was forced, particularly if Stewart was open behind him with nobody over the top of him. Converted. There was another instance where if he wanted to force it to Ferguson on a first read, he could have. He didn't, because it wasn't there. And sometimes the defensive coordinator on the other team gets paid a lot of money to do a job too. I thought Mike Tressel did a heck of a job in this game. Just as Tosh and Dan did on that side. I say, the defensive coordinators have a job to do too. Thought they both did really well.
Old school Big Ten game, man. Seriously, it was that type of called game for both defensive coordinators.
Just was, like I said, I thought both DCs did a fine job. Took away some of the things that each like to do on the other side offensively, particularly in the second half, really in the fourth quarter, what Oregon took away by way of the ground game from Wisconsin. and making it harder on them was evident. But no, I thought what Wisconsin did defensively was just really smart. So if anybody wants to, like I say, extrapolate off of this performance and try to apply it to what it could mean down the road, and particularly, and even using the week before, and Maryland is something there. All right, if you want to talk about, well, maybe some better defenses, particularly once you start getting into the postseason. Hey, they've got the tape now to go off of playing with two high safeties a lot more and never giving you a single high look if they can avoid it. And particularly when you get to play some of those better teams, maybe they have the front sevens. I have no idea if they're as good or better than Wisconsin's or what have you, but ultimately, if they have the talent and the ability to do some of these same sort of tactics, particularly in games where Tez Johnson may not be available, what does that look like? That's a fair question. That's a fair point, because it's not just about this game and the 8th and 8 weeks and all those things and on the road. Yeah, the week before against Maryland didn't necessarily look fantastic either. And there were reasons for that as well. But ultimately, when you're trying to apply it and ask, particularly among fans, what this may look like for a Washington game, or whether it be a rematch with Ohio State or a matchup with Indiana, again, should those things become official for a Big Ten championship matchup, hey, I get it. But, first things first, getting to the second bye, as late and absurd as it is, getting to it on the calendar that, the time they're getting to it, see what the health situation is across the board for Tez, for Marcus Harper, for Justice Lowe and Dante Manning, who both went down but then came back, for Jamari Caldwell, who went down very briefly in the game, came back and obviously helped at the game-winning interception at the end, went down after that play, and then made it to the sideline with what looked like a shoulder injury, and it looked like the same arm that was an issue earlier in the game for him, albeit briefly. You get an update on all these guys and see where it stands heading into Washington before you start fretting about what it may or may not look like in games that aren't even yet officially on the schedule. Deal with one thing at a time, and that's, like I say, the health situation being at or near the top of the list, given that, a lot of teams have already had the benefit of the second bye at this point, and Oregon is one of them one of the few who has yet to be able to have that, particularly with the 8-game stretch that nobody else had. It's just a different situation. So to me, I think that's when you get to the end of that kind of a gauntlet, just win.
Yeah, just win that game. Just get out of there with a victory in a difficult environment. And they did, and they showcased a trait, and Dan Lanning called it DNA traits, but I think they showcased a trait of an elite team, of a great team, to be able to weather a storm like that and come out with the win against an admittedly tough opponent, an opponent that had a good game plan. And 2 weeks now to rest, recover, continue to go through the motions at practice, but to be having an entire week of not having to prepare for somebody and then flip the switch to get ready for a Washington team that you bet they want to be a blemish on this Oregon team's schedule. You bet that they want to make sure that Dan Lanning doesn't get his first win against Washington, and all the narratives that are going to be swirling around that game when we talk about it next week. But this is such a good time for Oregon to have this bye, not just because they played these 8 games in a row, but because they need this moment to rest and recover and to mentally reset for the task ahead. The task ahead, of course, being making history is their obvious goal. I mean, this is a great team, a team that's been number one and will be number one for several weeks in a row, and perhaps through the end of the regular season. They want to go win the first national championship in Oregon football history. And there are a few teams in the history of this program that have been better equipped to do so in a landscape of college football that allows for them to do so in the expanded playoff. And this is a window. This is a chance. And this bye week, I'm sure everybody is happy for it for the reasons that we've talked about. But to me, the biggest one is you've got a long road ahead, longer than any team who is pursuing a national title has ever had. and this is the chance for them to rest up and prepare for that and get themselves right.
Ultimately, they have no control in the schedule, but I think, again, look, it was a inequitable schedule from the Big Ten across the board. Said that at the time. Not going to belabor the point because it's now all done and over with, but the bottom line is, in any number of ways, the idea that now Washington also has their second bye now. It's just that they had their first bye later than Oregon did, so they didn't have the 8 games in 8 weeks bit. But the fact that either of them have byes in week 13 of a 14-week regular season is just utterly preposterous, and that was even an option, that was even something that was to be considered is ridiculous. So, alas, I don't imagine, or I certainly hope for any team's sake, not just Oregon and Washington's sake, but for anybody for next season, also a 2-bye regular season, that the Big Ten will manage to avoid that for all of the criticism and finger pointing about who some SEC teams play at times in November. At least they don't have byes. They may have symbolically the equivalent of a bye, depending on if they're playing an FCS team or a low-level G5 team or something, but at least they're playing a football game. Nobody had a bye, in the second to last week of the season. And again, the Big Ten, to me, that was just a terrible league schedule from a equitable standpoint, by way of Oregon having the 8 games in 8 weeks and the 2 Fridays in a 3-week span. And then you throw in the bye at the timing that it is for both Oregon and Washington at the end. It really just does not make any sense. But so that I think if they had control, or if they had their druthers, I think they would have rather had the second bye really any time earlier than this, because it doesn't change the fact that the goal was still the goal at the end. If they had the bye this week, or this past week, or the week before, or the week before that, I don't think they would have been any less pleased. Look, it is what it is. They are where they are now, but I don't think anybody would have drawn up, let's have the second bye in a 2-bye season in week 13. That I'm not sure anyone would have wanted that, but that's what they got, so that's what they're rolling with. Outside of the moments and plays and the like that we've already touched on, anything else from this one, Ryan, that stands out to you, that sticks out, that's a particularly big takeaway? Because also calling it what it is, since time of possession and letting the clock go was kind of a big part of this, it was not a game with, it wasn't an unusually low number of plays. Oregon ended up getting to 71, which was somewhat unusual, given the way that it played out, particularly how the first half played out. But it really didn't necessarily feel that way, because in the total, there was 133 plays ran, and 74 were on the ground. And there were a whole lot of incompletions on Wisconsin's part in the passing game. So it really didn't necessarily feel like as many plays were run as there were. That aside, anything else that really stands out to you, or takeaways from it individually, collectively, that we haven't already touched on?
Yeah, I think the other biggest takeaway for me from this game was more of an existential one, and a continuation of something that obviously came to a head at the Michigan game, which is the ability of Dan Lanning to keep these guys focused on a week-to-week basis, and to motivate them, and to find unique ways to do so. Obviously, that moment at the end of the third quarter was not planned to be the situation that it was, obviously, by Dan Lanning. The game was not scripted to fit into a nice and exciting narrative for Ducks versus them. Oregon down 13-6 at the end of the third quarter. They participate in jump around, which they had planned to do pretty much all week, and sort of use it as like a opportunity to hype themselves up. Dan Lanning played it all week at practice. They treated it, as Dan put it, as sort of a Pavlov's dog situation, which, I mean, to invoke Sigmund Freud in your motivational tactics as a coach is something pretty interesting, and I think remarkable on Dan's part. But this team having a plan and finding ways to be motivated through the grueling nature of this season is, I think, one of the most interesting storylines about this group overall. And I think not only a testament to Dan, the coach, Dan, the person and motivator, but this team's buy-in and this team's collective nature to get behind something as simple as this and to use it as fuel. And obviously it wasn't the reason why Dylan Gabriel completed that pass to Terrence Ferguson, but if you're moping around and you're just watching all these people jump around in the stands and do what opponents have done when they've come to Autzen and shout's been going on, and you just stand there upset because of the game situation, you're going to have a different outlook and you're going to have a different approach potentially in the game than you are if you prepared for that moment in such a way and allowed it to be used as fuel. So, once again, they find a unique way to motivate themselves. And I think that a lot of credit goes to Dan, but this group being able to embrace that, to come together around these type of things is one of the special aspects of this team.
I think one of the only other plays that certainly draws a lot of attention that people have strong opinions one way or the other on is the fake field goal. And ultimately, to me, you really kind of fall into two schools of thought. I don't think there really is much to be gained from taking the points in that situation. Well, attempting the field goal. Let's not jump to the conclusion that it's taking points that are just absolutely to be presumed.
Yeah, Sappington had a great game, but there's no guarantee that he hits that.
Because, this is college football, and yes, any number of things can go awry in that situation. So to me, it kind of falls into the two schools of thought, since if you're going to immediately dismiss the idea that going from 3 to 6 is a particularly big difference, when ultimately, if you're going to go for a fake or you're going to go for it, you could be asking your defense to come up with the same stop in order to win the game, or at least avoid overtime, regardless. So either you say, if you're going to go for it, leave the offense out there, keep the ball in the hands of your quarterback, because after all, that seems to be working pretty well for you. Or you say, all right, well, you got the look you wanted. And after all, grand scheme of things, if you run it in practice and you feel good about it and you got the look that you feel is conducive to it, then you got to have the gumption to stick with the call. And grand scheme of things, if it was executed properly and Pat Herbert blocks who he's supposed to block in a cleaner path, James probably gets the gain. And I think plays like this ultimately draw either criticism or praise based purely on result and less about process. Because if James gets 4 more feet, what is the telecast saying, which helps drive the narrative and the perception to the masses especially, and then what are the rest of us saying? Oh, yeah, Lanning's aggressiveness! What a gutsy call! What an incredible! What a unbelievable!
Mad scientist, mad genius!
As opposed to, oh, he's a yard short on a play that was absolutely there for the taking, just wasn't properly blocked, and it's, oh my goodness, what are we doing? What? All right, well, are we talking about process? Are we talking about result? If you want to analyze the merits of going for it or not, that's one thing. And you want to say, and Blackledge is one of them, to point out, hey, if you're going to go for it, keep your offense out there and keep it in Dylan Gabriel. That's a fine position. I'm not saying otherwise. That there's something to be said for that. And plenty of others have voiced that perspective. That's fine. But to say that, like, it was a horrible idea or a horrible call because it failed, it didn't fail because Ross James is slow. It failed because it wasn't blocked properly. It wasn't, and it didn't fail because Wisconsin had an outrageous number of players on that side, and they didn't have enough hats to block them. They got the exact look they were looking for. It just wasn't executed properly, which is part of the game too. But you don't know that's going to happen. You practice it for a reason. You felt good about it for a reason. All right. Didn't work.
And you're willing to take the risk too because Wisconsin's offense was so anemic for so much of that game, and your defense has had such a great game that you absolutely trust those guys. And look what happened. Hindsight's 20/20 for taking the fake and doing it, but it's also 2020 when you look back at the decision overall, and then you see Jamari Caldwell throw a big paw up there and tip it, and Mateo Uiagalelei gets under it. So it worked out in the way that you feel like the risk was absolutely worth it in that situation, because again, like you said, they're 4 feet away from getting it, and even in not getting it, they get the stop, they get the win, and then what is there to worry about?
Right, and that's why I still say though, if you're talking about process, you're still confident in your defense because either you're trying to hold off a field goal for a tie or a touchdown to prevent, a loss in the event that you don't get the conversion. Whether you're going for with the offense or you're going for with the fake, that's the option. Because again, going from 3 to 6, all right, you're still now you're giving them a kickoff and you're trying to prevent the same touchdown for a loss anyway. So, like I say, to me, you fall in the two schools. I've yet to really encounter too many people who say, no, go from 3 to 6. And that I don't see a ton of merit in that necessarily. If you're playing a different kind of team with a different kind of offense, maybe. But with who you were playing and the timeouts and the game situation and the total inability to throw whatsoever against your defense, I can't really make much of that decision in terms of going for it in general. And to me, the process isn't to be so much criticized or scrutinized because I don't see any fault in it. And I don't even see, who am I to say one way or the other, but I really don't see much fault by way of even going for it in the style and manner in which they did with the fake field goal. Because, again, it'd be one thing if you said, well, they ran it, but they ran the fake, but they didn't even have the numbers. What were they doing? What were they thinking? Well, they had exactly what they wanted. Just wasn't executed properly. That's part of the game too, no doubt. But, sometimes things aren't executed properly and things work out and defy the numbers, a la the 4th down conversion on the pass to Ferguson. Because, again, if you're going to go by the numbers, that was way off script and went a whole other direction. So, all right, some things can work out in your favor sometimes when you go through those things, and sometimes things don't. But I don't fault the process. And if you're going to scrutinize or second guess based on only the result, like I say, I think that leads you to some very inconsistent conclusions. Because, again, if Ross James converts there and it's blocked properly on the edge in order for him to do so, I would have loved to have seen those who would have criticized in the event that it had been converted. Let's put it that way. No, I think it would have been more of a unanimous chorus of praise and lauding the gutsiness to make the call in the first place and how brilliant and how much he outsmarted Wisconsin, as opposed to, well, yeah, they converted and that's how they won the game, but I wouldn't have done that because that's crazy. I would have left the offense out there. Yeah, it worked out, but you never really hear too much of that. It's only based on the result. And I say, if you're making about process, I don't see any issue with the process. If you want to quibble about whether the offense should have been out there instead, fine point. But know that the defense also would have been out there with its personnel too. And you have no idea what the play would have been. They have no way of knowing. But bottom line, that would have been the only other main point or main moment, particularly late in the game, to me that was worth further discussion. Moving on from this Wisconsin win, though, for Oregon's purposes, and touching a little bit on the last week in the basketball season for both the men's and women's programs. I'd say a relatively quiet week in terms of his all fine results for Oregon's purposes. But at least on the men's side, boy, oh boy, you got for those who attended and for those who were watching with that Portland game, boy, oh boy, oh boy.
That was a bit of a sweaty one.
That was anything but quiet. That was putting a season in jeopardy 2 weeks into the season. And that's not hyperbolic. That's reality. And for those, I'm not here to become a math professor. The bottom line is, for those who know and understand the numbers and can appreciate what a truly not bad, not even terrible, potentially cataclysmic level loss. And not because I'm not looking, I don't care if Portland's good, bad, or otherwise. There's been plenty of years where Portland men's basketball has been quite good. Could have been a top 100 caliber of a team. Plenty of years where Portland was even better, historically speaking, than Oregon was in any given season. So it's not a matter of talking about power conference versus low major versus no. About where the programs are today and where they were analytically entering the game. I have no idea where Portland's going to end up being in the season. But in terms of, if you look at Oregon's non-conference schedule specifically, and even its conference schedule for that matter, there is no doubt that Portland is the weakest team on its schedule. On paper. Again, whether that proves to be the case come, Selection Sunday and the final analytics, I don't know. But on paper, when the schedule was constructed, there is no doubt that the easiest game, the weakest opponent coming off of last year by its analytics, etc., and even in the Ken Palm analytics to start this season, because there's no net ranking yet, because it's too small a sample, unequivocally, it was Portland. So using those as kind of a guiding principle, plus all the number of transfers and freshmen and those things that the roster has, I don't think they're suddenly going to become a top 100 team. They're probably going to be in the 250 to 300 range or worse. So if they're a quadrant 4 home game with a ranking that bad, and to what it certainly extrapolates to be, you don't make the NCAA tournament with that kind of a loss on your resume. It's extraordinarily rare. 2 teams last season got at large bids with quadrant 4 losses like that, and those are from high majors, including Northwestern. Mississippi State was the other, and the mid majors, Indiana State and Bradley among them, who had similar such losses, were on the outside looking in. And in Indiana State's case, despite the fact that they were quite high, they were very high in the net compared to some of these others, but they were low major and all the other things, and they had that albatross of a loss. Historically speaking, teams do not make the tournament with quadrant 4 losses. Any quadrant 4 losses, let alone a terrible one. And you would have been in week 2 of the season with that already on the resume, barring winning the Big Ten or in the auto bid in its conference tournament. Oregon would have been a bubble team all year had that held. And with 4 or 5 minutes left in that game, that's what it was looking like. And credit to Keyshawn Bartholomew and Jadrian Tracy for absolutely digging the Ducks out of a massive hole. That, let's put it this way, you run that final sequence, that final 6 minutes or so, 10, 20, 100 times, I'm not sure Oregon will get the majority. Not because they're not good, and not because Portland's better than they played down. No, just they were in a, statistically speaking, a extraordinarily difficult position. They were very compromised in terms of their ability to come back, just in terms of the amount of time that was left. They needed to make the exact sequence of plays and shots in order to make it happen and get missed free throws by Portland on the other side. And then once it gets to overtime, it's understandable that at that point, the pilots are completely shook. They had the game in hand. It was there for the taking, and they faltered badly. And Oregon certainly turned it around. But in terms of had it gone the other way and what really was at stake there in those last couple of minutes besides a win or a loss in early November, no, quite literally the season. And I do mean the season, because you don't recover from that. It borders on the statistically impossible. It just doesn't happen. I say, go take a look at the net rankings. Forget about not just for at large. Take a look for the auto bids. Take a look for the at larges also. Those are the kinds of losses that you just don't see on resumes, because tournament teams do not have those. Heck, some of the better NIT teams don't have those. Those are nuclear torpedoes to a basketball team's resume. That's just what the math does. I'm not telling you that that's right or just even. But those numbers, when you start getting into teams who could be in the 250 to 300 plus range in net, what those do to just completely skew and destroy the analytics in terms of average, particularly in that case, would have been an average loss number. That's why you can't recover. Yeah, you could be a 20-win team. Yeah, but if you've got 8 or 10 losses and one of them is a team in the 300s, that number is pulling the average so severely. That's why you can't recover from it. That's why it's so damning and detrimental. Like I say, it's the ultimate of albatrosses. That's why, again, for those who don't delve into all these things on a day-to-day and a week-to-week, and I get it, especially in November, it's football season, and what do you pay attention to and the like? Yeah, but that was what was at stake there in those last couple minutes. So credit to Oregon for being able to pull it off, especially to Bartholomew and Tracy, who, like I say, did all the work at the end to make that happen. But that was quite literally a season on the brink, because we literally would have been talking about a team who, are they even on the bubble and how can they stay on it? Would have been this conversation for the next 4+ months. They narrowly avoid it. They get away with it and avoid that disaster and turn around and ended up having a wire-to-wire win over, frankly, a far better team in Troy. That looks a lot better. And again, from a health situation standpoint, this team's in a good spot. I think you're starting to see the minute distribution start to take shape. I think you saw it, particularly in the first half, a little bit more with Troy. We'll see Thursday with Oregon State what that starts to look like also as this team takes it on the road. And then they've got, obviously, the neutral site games in Vegas the following week. We'll just set the stage for that in next week's podcast. And then, yes, then they're getting into league play and a trip to SC and a home game with UCLA. So the caliber of the schedule is about to take a massive jump up. Huge jump up over the next 5 or 6 games. Huge. Where they've been at times has been quite good. Their three-point shooting is still spotty, but depth, talent, all those things are clearly better, more balanced, and the like. Health is better. Those are all the good things. But mercy, they were on the precipice of something really rough last week there on Tuesday night in particular. For the women's side, quite a different situation where they have not had to avoid anything quite like that. That's for sure. They've gotten off to a very, very nice start, find themselves in the top 25, deservedly so far. And no, they've not been having to fret about or worry about disaster at all so far. They've gotten off to a very nice start, Ryan.
They have, and that upset win over Baylor obviously has highlighted the season so far. But they beat North Texas this past week. That's their only game on the schedule. They beat them by 31. Not a good North Texas team. Not a good North Texas team. Let's not mince words there. But I think Oregon's continue to showcase a lot of the traits that have allowed them to be successful in the early season and allowed them to pull that upset against Baylor. Balanced scoring. You've got 12 different players that scored in that game, and led by 2 players tied for first in scoring with 11 points. That's Elisa Mevis and Nani Falatea. So the balance is huge. I think that the defensive effort and intensity has been huge through the early part of the season. And they've come together, I think, quicker than perhaps Kelly Graves might have expected. They're playing for each other, sharing the ball in ways that teams comprised of so many transfers don't always do. So a credit, I think, goes to Kelly's for his ability to bring them together as quickly as he has, but also I think primarily to the players for their willingness to find ways to win in those sort of spread out and share the ball type ways. Deja Kelly, I think, is this team's star. I think that she's somebody that, she didn't have a great game against North Texas, 7 points in that one and only 2 assists with 4 turnovers, which is not what she wants. But she's going to be somebody that, whether it be through her work in the broadcasting department or her excellent scoring ability on the court is going to be a really prominent face in college basketball this season, and someone who is going to obviously represent this Oregon team however they shake their season out and however it goes. GCU is on the docket tonight. We're recording this on Monday, so that's tonight down at Matthew Knight Arena, and then Wednesday Auburn comes into town. The fighting former James Crepias, as it were, will be in town. That's a more challenging game, I think, obviously, than the GCU one, but GCU just put the hurt on Arizona State women, and that's a program absolutely in transition down there in Tempe, but still
very much so.
Still very much put the hurt on them. So it'll still in transition. So unfortunately, the days of Charlie Turner Thorne are long gone down in Arizona. But GCU more manageable, you would think, tonight for the Ducks, and then playing an Auburn team in a very solid conference in the SEC. By no means a cakewalk. Their schedule in non-conference play, Oregon's, is advantageous and really pretty comfortable by way of the games against teams that just come into Matthew Knight Arena. This schedule, and then they head on to a tournament in Hawaii. 2 games, November 25th and 26th, against Georgia Tech, South Dakota State. Both, I think, really solid challenges for this team at a neutral site before they return home for a non-conference matchup with Washington State. And then you get into Big Ten play a little bit with USC, which is obviously a great team with Juju Watkins.
Yeah, that's the next couple of games are obviously quite significant for the Oregon women. Not looking past Grand Canyon by any stretch, but you get into a stretch with some major conference opponents, or South Dakota State, who's usually a perennial tournament caliber team out of their league, and a Washington State program who, yes, obviously they're in transition in terms of conferences, but in terms of what they've done under Cami Etheridge for several years now, in terms of just being a proven winning team and winning culture there. Even if some of the names may change and the like, they didn't have the level of churn and turnover, certainly, that Oregon State experienced. So I have no idea whether or not they'll be anything like what they've been the last couple of years, but I don't think they're going to have fallen off quite as sharply, necessarily speaking. So bottom line, some quality games before, yes, that massive matchup with USC, which is on the afternoon of the Big Ten football championship game in Indianapolis. So alas, for those who may not be making the trip to Indy, should that become official in the not too distant future, they will have a viewing option in Eugene that is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, and frankly, it sucks that it's that day too, for everybody's sake, not just ours, because we, in all likelihood, will be busy covering football that day with as massive a moment as that is for that program, but just for Oregon sports fans in general to have their attention diverted, like that's an unfortunate sort of coincidence by way of the scheduling, because I think it's going to be fun to watch a player like Juju Watkins and the rest of that USC roster, one of the teams that's a contender for the national title. But it's also going to be a major test for an Oregon team that surprised people. Now, would I pick them to win that game right now? Probably not, just because the level of talent on both sides, there's a significant difference there. But they pulled that upset against Baylor, and they proved that they can be feisty, they can be gritty with these higher ranked teams. So yeah, anything's possible, certainly. And the Big Ten in general, as you alluded to in terms of talking about their schedule, this Big Ten women's basketball slate is pretty insane, and Oregon plays every one of the teams that's currently ranked, along with several of the ones that are receiving votes. I think it's like 8 teams at this point that are either ranked or receiving votes in the conference, which is just unbelievable, and many of them in the top 10, top 15. So that is a gauntlet for Kelly Graves' side, and I think it's going to be it's going to be difficult but advantageous at the same time, because I think Oregon is taking good care of business in non-conference. And so even if they have some welts from that Big Ten schedule, they're in a great conference. They're going to have a great opportunity to, even if they don't end up winning it, to get in that large bid.
We'll certainly have plenty to talk about in the weeks ahead, not just football-wise, but yes, particularly as the basketball season gets going, about some of these games in particular. But we've already touched on the issue of scheduling in football and how that wasn't necessarily equitable, and some of the things that could be done better there in the future and the like. And by the way, for those who are maybe thinking about or starting to pose the question of when will we know the 25 football schedule, other than the opponents, when we know the actual schedule, I'm hearing that will be postseason. So you're probably looking into February-ish. I'm not sure, even mid-January. Quite literally, I think you're going to be talking more February before we know that. And I don't think the Big Ten is going to be alone in that regard. I think that may be the new normal, at least for the next couple of years, until some other things get sorted out with the playoff and some other factors. But be it all as it may, to the scheduling point for basketball, because we're talking about it with this women's game, there are any number of things that could have been done better for the league. And it was that way in the Pac-12, and it's that way now in the Big Ten. There are things that could be done better for these December matchups. I mean, there is no way. There is no way. None. That anybody can rationalize for me that SC is playing that day at all. Home, road, whoever they're playing, there is no way anybody can rationalize that. In a conference game. If you wanted to tell me that they deliberately scheduled a non-conference game that day and that was their choice, that's a different matter. But to say that SC or UCLA women's basketball specifically this season, and I'm picking them because they're at or near the top of the rankings, that they would be playing on the day of the Big Ten football championship, I do not understand the logic of that whatsoever. I don't. And on the men's side, again, same thing. Why is the Oregon men playing UCLA the day after the Big Ten football championship? And that has nothing to do with it. I'm talking about for fans. I'm talking about for exposure, let alone for ticket sales and anything else. If you're a season ticket holder and you're a fan of Oregon and you want to go to the Big Ten championship game, but you're a men's basketball season ticket holder, what are you supposed to do? I hope you can get on the flight with us. I mean, what do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, hop on the red eye, James Crepea special. So,
I mean, truly, I hope you get on the first flight out of Indy on Sunday. You know, it's usually a game that's awfully high demand. Probably one of the bigger home games by way of league schedule that you've got, other than maybe Purdue and Indiana. But truly, like, if you're a season ticket holder and you want to support your school, your program, what have you, if you're a donor, let alone just, casual or anything else. The Pac-12 did these kinds of things, and I talked about how it wasn't great for fans. No, it wasn't great. That it was bad for fans in those spots. No different here. There are things that can be done a lot better in scheduling. It's not just about football. It's for some of the other sports as well. I mean, we're going to talk about it with the basketball season coming up, but there are adjustments that can be made. Small things in the grand scheme of things, but big, particularly to fans and big to ticket holders. Yeah, if you're a season ticket holder, basically the league is telling you they do not care. The school does, because that's who you're giving the money to, but the conference is telling you, yeah, we don't care when they do things like that. And I do not think that is a smart message. I don't care who the league is. I don't think that's a particularly smart message to be sending for certain marquee programs. There's any number of things that can be done differently. But we pointed out with this one because of the caliber of the game in both, again, for the men's side and the women's side, that weekend. On one day you could say, oh, isn't it great that Oregon's hosting those teams and those are some of the teams? Yeah, sure. They would host them probably at any point in the season. But that they're hosting them the weekend of the football championship. Oh, well, you don't know if they're going to play in it. When they were putting the schedules together, they knew the couple of teams who were most expected to be there. If you want to tell me, well, they did something with Indiana and who could have seen it coming, that's different. You would not want to put Ohio State or Indiana or Oregon, in terms of hosting particularly big conference basketball games that weekend. If I were the league office, I might have taken that into consideration. No differently than I would have said the same thing about the Pac-12 for Arizona potentially, or UCLA or something like that in a certain year, or Oregon or SC in a certain year, or whatever the case was. There are small things here that could be done better, that are outside the scope and the parameters and the say and wherewithal for the schools. But things that the schools have to tell the league office in terms of how can we do better, what can be done better in the future. Those are things, because again, like I say, if I feel for you, if you are a season ticket holder of either of those programs or both, and you're put up against it in terms of your ability to even make it to these games that you badly want to go to, and you've got to either choose or forfeit your ability to go to one or the other. Again, I just think it's a bad message that any league office is sending to you, the fan, when they schedule things like that. And I think there's means and remedies that can be done to make it more conducive and better, including potentially putting a whole bunch of basketball games in a neutral site around the site of their football championship game. And I think there's ways to do it for TV inventory and all those other things to where, fans aren't necessarily put in that spot. But alas, we can get into that in the future in the offseason and those things where, can delve into it further. But we mention it now because these are games that are coming up in the not too distant future and things that you recognize readers, fans, and the like, spectators have to consider. And I'm sure they can submit questions like that to Ryan's weekly mailbag, and remind folks how to send those questions in, Ryan, because I think we may have headed off some of those questions at the pass by taking on this subject. But should they have any other fine scheduling questions or anything else, how to fire off those questions to you?
Yeah, about literally anything Ducks related, send them to me on Twitter at Ryan T. Clark, or on Blue Sky, Ryan T. Clark now, which I am seeing a much better level of engagement on there than I have on Twitter in the last few weeks, and that's obviously a product of however I suppose our good friend Elon Musk is choosing to operate that platform. But be all that as it may, you can reach me on Twitter or Blue Sky, Ryan T. Clark, and then via email at rclark@oregonian.com for the mailbag. Any and all questions, send them there.
Well, there you have it. So you can wax poetic accordingly on any number of the issues du jour. And Ryan will opine accordingly and respond accordingly to you there. And again, a reminder for those who don't already, but we thank you for listening as always. But reminder, if you don't already subscribe to the Ducks Confidential podcast and the Oregonian Sports Podcast channel, to like, subscribe, all those things. So that way our podcast populate your feed automatically, and the podcasts of our fine colleagues at the Oregonian do as well. And with that, we will see you next week, where there won't be a football game to go over, since after all, it is a bye week. But there will be a rather significant men's basketball game to go over for the local audience with Oregon State. And as we mentioned, some of these other games on the women's side as well. And a pretty big football game to look forward to wrap up the regular season as well. So with that, we will bid you adieu this week, and we will chat again next week.